Good morning. I'm Brian Stelter, and it's time for Reliable Sources. We're going to spend a lot of time this morning talking about ISIS and ask what I think is a really important question. Are government officials overblowing the threat to the homeland, and are media figures helping them do that? But first, something we should all know more about: how radical Islamic views are spread. My first guest is a radical, an extremist. He has a strong following on YouTube, where he posts videos of his sermons and TV appearances. He believes that Islamic law known as Sharia should be implemented worldwide. British Prime Minister David Cameron has called his views absolutely despicable and appalling. On Friday, Cameron raised the country's terror threat level to severe and said Islamic extremism is the root cause for that alert. I want to ask my next guest about that. His name is Anjem Choudary. His rhetoric sometimes comes across like catnip to some cable news shows. Here he is on Hannity on Wednesday night. And let's be honest, the appearances often devolve into shouting matches that generate a lot of heat, but not much light. But I have a lot of questions for him myself, and I hope we can get right into those right now. He joins me from London. When you saw the video of Jim Foley being beheaded earlier this month, how did you react? Because virtually everyone here in the U.S. reacted with horror. How did you react?
Well, there's no doubt that beheading someone is a very gruesome and terrorizing act. And I believe that that is precisely the agenda of the Islamic State, to terrorize the enemies who they perceive to be their enemies so that they leave Muslims alone. Remember that, as far as they are concerned, the Americans and the British committed, all kinds of atrocities in the same area, and they're thinking about bombing Muslims again.
How can you not look into the camera, though, and unequivocally condemn the beheading of a journalist who was there trying to tell the story of the people affected by bombings and killings in Syria?
Well, quite frankly, I think it's completely pathetic and absurd for you to ask a Muslim to condemn the killing of one individual when hundreds of thousands of Muslims have been slaughtered, of which you don't know the name. People have been raped and they've been humiliated. We have our sister Afia Siddiq in America, who was beaten and tortured.
But I'm talking about a specific case that has been widely publicized about a journalist who was actually trying to tell the story of Muslims in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I say, I think that this is the result of the barbarity of the American foreign policy. And, if we're not going to talk about the cause...
And you've said that again and again. But don't you understand that journalists are in a unique category? The others who are apparently being held by ISIS as well are in a unique category. They're trying to tell the story of this population.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I think your own assessment is completely different to the Muslims. As far as the Muslims in the region are concerned, they're not making a distinction on the one hand between civilians and military, because they see that the general populace of America have re-voted for people like Obama and Bush, who continued their policy of tyranny in the area. And secondly, they see the journalists as really the propaganda machine of the Obama administration, meaning look at what happened, for example, in Gaza.
That's a crazy thing to say, given that the only reason why you know about Abu Ghraib is because of American journalists. The only reason why you know about the abuses at Guantanamo Bay are because of American journalists.
No, that's not actually true. Because, nowadays people don't need American or British journalists, because everybody has a camera, let's face it, on their phones.
Oh, come on.
And you can see via social media. Well, I mean, if you're not going to allow me to finish a sentence, really, we can have a shouting match if that's what you prefer. But allow me to finish at least a sentence. You invited me onto your program. And what I'm trying to say to you is that people perceive the journalists in general, in particular the Western journalists, in a very bad light.
When you talk about propaganda, you realize that many people here in the U.S. believe what you post onto YouTube is propaganda. And there's been calls to actually censor that content. How have you reacted to that?
Well, as I say, I think that there will always be two camps in the world. From the time that Allah created man, there's always been those people who follow the shaitan and those people who follow Allah. And they will lie about each other, maybe, or they will maybe use propaganda about each other. There's a war taking place, so undoubtedly demonizing the enemy, trying to undermine them, this is all part of it.
I think I hear you saying that you do use propaganda and you do produce propaganda of your own. And I think there's a big difference between what you hear a legitimate government official say and what you would say on YouTube.
Well, what I say is that, I'm willing to be you know, if you like, questioned and to be interrogated. You know, and I think that you will never find something different from what I say publicly to what I say privately. I believe that the Sharia is the best way of life. I believe one day it will come to America and the rest of the world.
When I hear you say that about America, and I know you've said it in the last few days, it reads to me as something that's preposterous. But I respect that you try to get your message out however you can. What I wonder, though, is aren't you abusing the press freedoms that you would like to see eliminated under Sharia law?
No, actually, you know, I believe that Allah created eyes to see and a tongue to speak. You know, nobody says to you, you know, that you have a right to speak. Rather, this is something that Allah created, and He gave you the ability.